U.S. energy consumption somewhat mirrors global energy consumption and some of the trends that we see in other countries. But we'll look a little more in detail in consumption in the United States. This chart shows the energy consumption in the United States by source. The sources on the left are all renewable sources, and the sources on the right are non-renewable sources. And you can see that we're using a lot more of the non-renewable sources than we are renewable. And I think we've said that 89% of energy consumption in the United States is by non-renewable sources. And the biggest one here is petroleum. That's basically powers transportation and also some manufacturing. This is another chart showing basically the same thing. It's just showing where all of the energy is being consumed. So petroleum, again, is the biggest source of energy that's being consumed in the United States, followed by natural gas and then coal. But I do like seeing it as a pie chart because I think it's easier to tell what's the biggest piece of the pie. And so also it shows that renewable energy still only accounts for 11%, and then it breaks it down of this 11%, what are the different areas of renewable energy. And hydroelectric is a big one, biofuels is a big one, and wind is a big one. Solar is only 6% of that 11%, so it's not so big yet. Okay, there's a lot going on in this chart, so let's walk through it and think about it a little bit. And I have some questions here that can guide us. So what types of sources are consumed by transportation? So the way you would read this chart, you would say this is the sector that's consuming energy, and 92% of the energy that's being consumed by the transportation sector is coming from this red line, which is petroleum. 3% of the energy used for transportation is natural gas, and then 5% is from renewable energy. Similarly, you can look at one of the sources to see where it's going. So if we look at nuclear energy, nuclear electric power, 100% of that goes to generate electricity or to power an electric power plant. So that one is pretty simple. Renewable energy, almost half of it is going to generate electricity. About a quarter of it is going up here to industrial uses. So industry is using renewable energy sources. And then 13% of it is going to the transportation sector. So you can kind of get a feel if you look at this chart of what it's being used for. Coal, like nuclear energy, almost 91% of that is being used to generate electricity. So some of the questions: which sector uses more renewable energy sources? So the sector that uses the most renewable energy by percent is the electric power generation. Which sector consumes nuclear energy, electric power generation? And then transportation, we said, is from petroleum. I just find it interesting to kind of think about in our homes how we're using electricity, because that's something that we can make a difference with. And so in our homes we tend to use almost half of our electricity goes to power miscellaneous appliances like your clothes washer and dryer, your dishwasher, stove, computers, all of those different small items. Then you have the air conditioning. Across the United States, about 15% of our energy is used for air conditioning. I think in the desert Southwest, where Arizona State University is located, it would be a much higher percentage than 15%, depending on what season you're looking at. To heat water, so your hot water heater uses almost 10% of your energy. Lighting is another 10%, so that's why your mom or dad may have always told you, turn the lights off when you leave a room, because it uses up 10% of the electricity in a home. Your refrigerator and freezers use up another 10% almost. Space heating up your house, 8.5%, and then I love how there's a whole category just for televisions and related equipment that use 6%. So, and there's whole studies that they do, the Energy Information Administration, so they do all of these studies on how do we consume electricity in our homes, and there's plots you can look at of, if homes that tend to have more than one television, how much energy they consume. So there's all kinds of correlations there. Over time, we are becoming more energy efficient in our households. You can see in 1978, the average household consumed 138, well, all of the houses together consumed 138 million BTUs. I'm sorry, that is per household, 138 million BTUs. And then in 2009, the average consumption per household was only 90 million BTUs. So it is going down. We are becoming more efficient. We're becoming more knowledgeable about how to save energy. People have better windows to keep the cold or hot air in or out, and we are doing a better job with that. If you look by region, this study is starting to get old, but they haven't done a new study that I can find. I think it's interesting to see that by region you see different amounts of energy consumption, and part of that is because heating a home, it's not as efficient of a process as cooling a home. So when we look at the Midwest and the Northeast, these two areas tend to use more energy because of the heating costs and the amount of energy it takes to heat a home, whereas the South and Western states, which don't require as much heating, they tend to use less energy overall. And then finally, if we look at motor vehicle mileage, fuel consumption, and fuel economy, there's a lot going on in this graph, but they do kind of put it all in here together. So fuel consumption has remained fairly steady even though we're driving more miles, and that's because the fuel economy of cars has gotten better over time. So if we look at just this one plot, you can see that fuel consumption is the green line. Fuel consumption has gone down slightly since the 70s, whereas mileage, the total miles driven by cars, has gone up. And then that blue line tells us why. That's because you can see how fuel economy or fuel efficiency, some people call it fuel efficiency, has gone up steadily over that same time period, and so it's more than canceling out the increase in the mileage that people are driving.